Thank you, Chairman Duncan and Ranking Member Barber, for the invitation here to discuss the very real national security threats that can arise from the restrictive land management policies. But I also like to join Mr. Barber in recognizing the work of the Border Patrol. They work very difficult circumstances, and we all salute them here. Also like to recognize behind me Sheriff Todd Garrison. He's Doña Ana County Sheriff. I appreciate your invitation for him to testify today. He's a fourth-generation resident of Las Cruces, New Mexico area and has been a great sheriff. I'm pleased to call him friend. We work together on many of the issues that affect the 2nd District. The issue of security along the border that arises from restrictive land management policies is one that's often overlooked here in Washington. People are removed from the situation, don't see it every day. Again, these big, wide-open areas that Congressman Barber and I represent are very difficult to secure. And the situation doesn't just exist on the southern border. The problems of security exist on the northern border as well. When you get to the federal lands along the border, then the situation becomes even more difficult. I believe that history is going to give us some insight as to the potential for security threats within the lands that have been recently designated and the surrounding communities, the threats that they're going to face. For years, the Oregon Pipe Cactus National Monument in southern Arizona has been a human and drug smuggling corridor. In 2002, Park Ranger Chris Eggle was killed in the monument by drug smugglers. While a vehicle barrier was constructed around the monument after Ranger Eggle's murder, the border south of the monument is nowhere near secure. And I would put up slide 1 for you to take a look at. That slide shows the signs that warn American citizens not to go beyond a certain point in these areas that are inside the U.S. jurisdictional boundaries, but they lie in the monuments where it's more difficult for federal agents or federal officials to patrol. Large portions of the monument are either not accessible to the public or only accessible when traveling with armed park rangers. On the Oregon Pipe Cactus Monument website, the Park Service states that illegal border crossings and activities, including drug smuggling, occur daily. Slide 2, if we see that, in some areas you'll find backpacks, abandoned clothes, and trash left behind from people crossing the border illegally, usually carrying the substances that we don't like to invite into this country, drugs or whatever. I don't think that this is what President Franklin Roosevelt envisioned when he designated that monument in 1937. On slide 3, in the eastern half of Arizona sits the Chiricahua National Monument. While it lies north of Douglas, Arizona, a decent stretch north of the U.S.-Mexico border, it's also a haven for drug traffickers. Last year, a Park Service employee was the victim of a brutal assault by a drug smuggler in broad daylight. The victim was bludgeoned with a rock until she passed out and nearly died. The suspect stole her vehicle and luckily was arrested the next day for drug smuggling. The Chiricahua Monument is known to have cartel lookout points to signal the optimum time for a smuggler to make his or her way through the monument. Is this what President Coolidge had in mind for violators and Park Service, for visitors and Park Service personnel when he designated this monument? Keep in mind that many of these nightmare scenarios have occurred despite a 2006 memorandum of understanding between the Department of the Interior, Department of Homeland Security designating the facilities better Border Patrol access. These stories are all too common on federal lands near the border, and I'm afraid that history will repeat itself in the newly designated Oregon Mountains Desert Peaks National Monument. If we put up slide 4 at this point, as the following map shows, all 180 miles of New Mexico's southern border are designated as high-intensity drug trafficking areas by the Department of Justice. The southwest border is, of course, where the vast majority of people coming across the border illegally are apprehended and narcotics shipments are seized. Then finally, on slide 5, the Portillo Mountains is a part of the Oregon Mountains Desert Peaks National Monument closest to the border on the map, currently has restrictions on motorized vehicle use. Local and state officials expressed strong objections to the President's unilateral monument designation because of the Federal Government's questionable law enforcement record in protected areas. This is why I offered the legislation that would have created a smaller monument footprint far away from the border with guaranteed, unfettered access for law enforcement personnel. I fear that what we've seen on the border in Arizona will happen in New Mexico. My constituents fear that also. There must be guaranteed access for all law enforcement personnel, including the ability to chase a suspect while off-road with an off-road vehicle. Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, again, I thank you for looking into this issue. Many places on our borders are in precarious and volatile situations. For our tourists and residents, it's not a matter of partisanship, it's simply a reality. The safety of these people visiting our treasured landscapes is a paramount issue for the Federal Government to manage and take seriously. We all want this pristine area protected for generations to come, but those who have the privilege of visiting the Oregon Mountains and other protected areas have a right to be protected. I hope that today's hearing will shed some light on how those who would do harm to our communities take advantage of restricted access for the public and law enforcement. Yield back.